Hello, and welcome to BonkTable. Today, I'm going to be doing a new segment for the YouTube channel. It's going to be called Storytime. This segment is really just going to be a capturing of different stories in the world of Adhya that's published by Parabellum, and I'm just going to read them out. That's really it. The reason why I'm actually doing this is because there was a guy who was on the Conquest Discord, and he's like, hey, I don't really have time to read any of this, but I can listen to it. Is there anyone doing lore or anything like that? And I was like, I'll read them out. This seems fun. So the idea of story time is really, I'm going to read out the stories. I'm going to do maybe 15 to 30 minutes. I'm just going to pick a bunch of short stories from the website, read them out for everybody. If you haven't read them yourself, or maybe read a couple, and yeah, it's really just going to be me going through them slowly but surely. I plan to release this segment once a month. There's probably going to be different voices on it, because it's really just public reading. We're going to find out which ones of my friends are really terrible at it. And yeah, I hope you guys sit back, relax, and enjoy this. You know, if you're driving, if you're just like listening or whatever, it's a lore. I plan to kind of hit a story for each faction and then just kind of rotate and, you know, get to half an hour. So yeah, that's kind of what this is. Living World. I will probably read off Living World and get a couple friends and maybe even family members to read off different characters, so it's kind of like a living story. That's something I have kind of an idea of and plans to doing, but this is first off kind of the test to see how it really goes. So, hope you enjoy. Stories of Adhya. 100 Kingdoms, a Pantheon, and the Aspects. Considering the mosaic of different tribes, cultures, and even languages that were assimilated by the Old Dominion, one can begin to glimpse the Heraclean task that Hazel undertook in the creation and shaping of the Pantheon. His success allowed him to establish himself as the leader of the Pantheon, wiping most other religions and practices that did not worship him as the All-Father. By the time Haziel decided to shape the Pantheon around him, his insights of human psyche was immense. This is made evident very easily as the image of the Pantheon he helped forge persists to the present day, expressing humanity's desire to worship throughout the ages. 12 were the Pantheon's main deities, each, however, with a retinue of lesser deities, demi-deities, angelic figures, and servants, expressing more specific virtues of each deity's aspect to ensure their control. Indeed, to this day, there is a direct correlation between the roles of Haziel's Pantheon, for instance, and the deist aspects of the 100 Kingdoms. Even the theists, in their intricate tenets of their worship that hide behind the idea of a single deity, recognize and worship separately lesser expressions of Theos' will, as well as archangels and saints that mirror these archetypes. The ruler/the father. Then I saw the first of lights, and heard one of the seven speak with the voice of authority. I am come. I looked, and behold, the brightest of the sun's golden rays crowning his head, a hammer in one hand, his other hand empty waiting. Haziel Samashra Sophukus, Elia, the Lightbringer, the Son of Light, the All-Father, the foundation of creation. Book of Light, 2:25-27. The Mother. There is no known civilization, modern or ancient, living or extinct, that does not include the aspect of the Mother in their worship. From Demetra, the old Helianton goddess, or Nin Ishtra, the fertility mother of the Neon Tali, Yinsha, the seed of the Yin Yang, found even inside of Uma, the first woman of the Calphiates. The mother is not only worshipped but adored as a very important figure. Even the strictest of Esteminons of the city-states, in their flat-out denial of any worship, have personified Sophia, the wisdom of knowledge, an avatar similar to that of Nuala. Miklos Moliner, the Aspects. The Knight. My sword to you, Protos, warrior divine, so that it is drawn for your glory. My shield to you, Sebas, celestial protector, so that it guards those your grace. My mind to you, Ninurtru, wisdom of war, so that it falls in your virtue. My death to you. Klingon, first of knights, my gift for all of yours. Whether I live or die, I am yours. Holy, holy, holy. Lord Knight, glory to your name, thy will be done. The last battle prayer of Legion 12. Pernanax. The Seer. The Seer, or the bureaucrat, in the modern form of the aspect, according to the deist, was possibly the last celebrated deity of the celestial host, and yet among the oldest archetypes known to mankind. For the ancient Faetics, before being assimilated by the Dominion, the aspect was the creator, the god-child, Nabu Artilleritus, roaming the night skies as the constellation known to them as the Boatman and to us as the Scales. All life, the P-Tex believed, is but the stories devised by the Sky Sailor. When astrology spread and the Dominion expanded, Nabu naturally followed as the deity of prophecy and knowledge, abandoning his boy incarnation, fused with Orcus, the star seer of the Syro-Mayans. It was only during the later days of the Dominion that he assumed the role that distanced him from everyday worship, as the judge of the departed, knowing better than anyone the secrets of all souls. Miklos Mulner, The Aspects. The Fool / the Trickster. Of endless shifts, witty and cunning, a robber, a horse-thief, a bringer of dreams, a watcher by night, a thief at the gates, one who has soon to show forth wonderful deeds among the gods and mortals, with names as many as the orange feathers in his hair, Bacchus, Stenmos, Leocundis, Denos, Hermas, the temper of odds, the trick of light, the laugh of God. Hymns 6:12. The Crafter. But the Crafter is now a burden. It limits him as a ruler. It limits his range of perception. From his new position, he begins to see the laws of reality more clearly. So he visits Festus, a mortal smith. He promises him secrets in his craft that no one has ever heard before. In exchange, he is to live in solitude, deaf and mute to his mortal world. The mortal agrees. Festus becomes a living legend, playing a vital role in the technological peak the Dominion reached, and in time, the crafter's aspect shifts from Hazrael, who can now expand fully to the Father. Hazrael becomes the All-Father, a god thus far unnamed and unshaped. Under the faith of mortals, reality shifts. Hazrael is and has been the Father, the ruler, king of gods and men. Festus is the crafter, but hints remain that betray the truth. The red fire of creation in his hair, forge hammer in one hand, fires in the other. Festos, Savargo, Vulcanus, Hazmash, the one who makes, the forger of all crafts. Who different really is the imagery from the Father, with the sun's golden rays crowning his head, a hammer in one hand. Forbidden text of the Pancreum Library, attributed to the Anthromatic. The Magi. Then from the pressures of all the seven I saw an eighth light, and heard its voice speak in unison. I am come. I looked, and behold, clad in translucent robes, two bodies back united. The Lady Curie, Aurora, Zoria, Escalette, and the Lord Hecus, Arcturus, Volos, Metroporos, the Master of Possibilities, the Lord of Skies and Lady of Earth, the Artist of Creation. Book of Light, 2:35-36. The Untamed, the Beast and the Barbarian. Much like the Magi, the Untamed presented a dual manifestation. It is a visage, a combination of man and beast. At first, those were possibly heavily influenced by the pagan tribes who worshipped animal gods in the Old Dominion. But in time, the two faces of the Untamed were split into what would become the Beast and the Barbarian. Today they are worshipped by and large separately, but the very existence of the Nords explains the Untamed's persistence in being remembered as a single entity, now and then. The difference of the two aspects lies in their place of sorts, but their core remains the same. Whether by nature or choice, the Untamed exists outside of the established society of man. The Beast is the Untamed Wild, the part of the world that can never be part of civilization. To this day, deists often name wandering monsters as its manifestations. There is a tendency to perceive the beast as evil, but as the deist questioner of the beast, Rolf Hockmanson, has written in his Beast Within, it is not so, even its most monstrous apparitions. Gugulan, the chimera, with the three melves, hunger, Urina, the antlered bitch, parenthood, Minos, the bull man, sexual drive, Satet, the three-eyed serpent, survival. They are instincts, primal urges, stripped from the ulterior motives, neither evil nor good, and yet the birthing power of both. The very lack of logic, human thought behind these, however, turns the beast into a very frightening aspect indeed. The second manifestation is that of the barbarian, and unlike the beast's connection to the wild, the barbarian is very much human and often part of society, both lawless and a lawbreaker. Denying to conform to the mandates of society, it is really not that hard to understand why the barbarian was conceived as an aspect of Hazriel. Budaku, or Hokar, Burris, the wild, the lawless, the untouched. The places where all light aims to reach, says the Book of Light. What better way for an expanding religious state to convince its subjects to one conquest after the other, than a deity that exists with the sole purpose of being eventually conquered, but being ever so elusive. Today, while the analogy of the barbarian to the Nords is obvious and easy, the truth is that the deists often name agitators, renegades, rebels as aspects and manifestations of the barbarian. So fetus, rational faith. The soldier. Let kings worship rulers and heroes worship knights. Let queens wear the mantles of mother to disguise their ambition. Let hunters worship beasts and barbarians, let the mage worship twin heads. And while they do so, I ask, who was there in all the battles ever fought? Who fought with nature over crop fields at all times of peace and fought enemies of battlefield at all times of war? It was no king or queen. It was no mage, it was no knight. They only exist to revel in moments of history, not every day. It was you, people. The simple people, the true people. You have your own aspect, your own protector. You who work tirelessly. You who fight endlessly. Remember the poet, who bears the greatest burden, I wonder. The greatest king's head. A single crown it lies under. But who carries the scythe and who carries the spear? Who fought without choice yet also fought without fear? The weight of history always fell on one shoulder. Hail thee, unsung hero, hail thee, unknown soldier. Questionnaire of the Soldier, Donna Johnson. The lover. Sometimes one must wonder on the nature of the heathens. Often as the church has been chastised for its denial to accept the so-called lover aspect as a saint, claiming there are no examples of lovers in our prayers, they say we deny our faithful something natural. I say the qualities of one's faith is measured by its teachings. What do they say? What do they worship? Amos was the archer whose arrow started the War of 11 Lilies in Gallion, before the Empire. Say the Gallian deists, bringing love to use of multiple feuding families. Eros, says an excommunicated poet, is the cause of misery that took the life of 2 blooming adolescents, by their hands no less, and that play so loved by wistful use of the nobility. Inidate was the temptress who offered another's wife to Arion, ignited the Aliron campaigns. Further back in time, Isha, another archer, apparently, spread chaos among the clans of the Neon people, before salvation came by the Old Dominion. They say they preach love, but all they really preach is war and chaos. They say such is our world, but I say such is them. Brother Jeremiah of Santique Volto. The Wanderer. Deists proclaim the Wanderer exists in every age. Ha! Fools! I have searched far and wide in all my travels and all my exploits. I have never encountered such an entity. Captain Raycom Maloids. The Victim. Perhaps the most bizarre apparition of the divine in the old Pantheon was the Victim. It never bore a name, and its church was always small, disregarded by history as a non-factor. There is strong evidence that it endured the long centuries leading to Hazriel's fall, where ironically, it was destroyed entirely as they never joined the refugees, but rather stayed to help those in need in Capitus. After all, they were many. Very few deists remember this aspect today, and even a few venerate it, but the truth is that their charity work is unparalleled and their paradigm simple. Say a prayer for the fallen and remember their innocence. So fides, rational faith. Stories of Ea, Spires, the Battle of Nepentha. The Legion is here! Turning south, he saw them, many following his example, cheering at the sight, clad in full plate, the likes of which even knights envied. The legionnaires of steel march, their metallic steps booming in perfect tempo. Their great claymores were balanced on their shoulders, a ceremonial weapon for most, an instrument of death for these elite warriors. They had no banner, not in the platoon Hunfrid could see at least. But the Armentilium dragon flew prominent on their kilts. Protruding from the plate, the Legion's own insignia carved on each Legionnaire's pauldron. As the command to engage was given, Hunfrid had to stop looking, but he heard them. "Steel!" cried their commander. "Parpatus!" answered the Legion, and the marsh shook for their voices as they opened their pace. "That's it, kid," said a man next to him, smirking. "The day is ours, aye." Hunfrid nodded, smiling weakly. Aye, he thought, the day is ours surely. Then it came. Hunfrid didn't see them. His eyes were pinned on the three brutish forms from the north, charging from their flank, one falling, pierced in tens of places by Jurgen's sharpshooters. It made little difference, really. Two of them were more than enough to crash the men-at-arms. Each arm a battering ram holding a massive bladed fist weapon. From far to the southeast he saw another trio, one of them slashing upwards in an uppercut. A man arched in the air some 15 feet high, his limbs as lifeless as his crossbow that flew next to him. "Steel!" cried the centurion's voice again from behind. "Hostibus!" came the roaring answer, and the Legion brought their blades on their hands, charging. If any could stop the brutes, it was them, Hunfrid thought, before he noticed they were charging west towards the rear of the knights, searching for their target. He finally saw it. Despite its size, it looked like it crawled, multiple legs flailing around its sickening motion of unnatural joints. Clawed feet dug into mud and earth, propelling it forward with a speed greater than that of a galloping horse. While the legs looked beastly, the body was insectoid, the abdomen and thorax covered in a black shell of a bug or ant. The insect head was twisted on its neck, its mandibles turned upwards and backwards, but a pale humanoid mass that looked forward, cold, expressionless. Long arms like logs protrude from the thorax were pulled back, the abomination ready to fall on the knights and claw through them like thresher upon weed. The Legion centurion got to it first. Holding his claymore upside down from both hilt and blade, he roared as he pierced one of the abomination's feet. It stalled the beast for but a moment, but he was crushed by the leg behind, but the charge had been interrupted. Rushing to the commander, great swords in hand, his men fell on the monstrosity with vengeance. Some trying to hit the joints, others the heels, while few pierced upward trying to crush through the shelled abominum. Black liquid and an alchemic stench ran from its legs, but the abomination paid little heed. With swift moves, it lowered its claws, hands toward the humans that would pester it. Hunfrid had never seen plate being slashed and pierced so easily in his life. In mere moments, it was standing on a spreading pool of crimson mangled with mud, dead bodies, and torn plates around its feet. From deep within its body, a muffled whimper echoed, like a soft serenade or lament. In his shock, the men-at-arms wondered if there was death and gore it caused or it was its own, the cursed soul. Stories of Conquest. Dweghom. Adhya. Ruin of Strangers. In this hold we remember. Remember every sight, every offense, every injury. Remember the old enemy and remember the new. The ones who offered the tools for the crimes committed. Remember those who would call them gods or friends. Cohorts to the dragons. Parasites of the world. Insults to those worthy existence. We remember and we say, bring war to all strangers. This is the only discernible memory above the gates. High on the slopes of the mountain range that marks the start of the Weaver Courts, where lies Gordon, the domain of strangers. It is an insult of a name for all Dweghom, but is a name that all Dweghom remember. If the halls of Dordom once remembered the time and events that gave it its name, the Menomancer's inscriptions of these memories have long been defaced. Gone are as well the treasures of the Dragon Rook that stood in its place before it, and gone are even the bodies of the ancestors, which were sealed in their houses. Still, the Dweghom remember its name, even as they prefer to call it Beterbos, the one which fell, all but those who live in it and have paid in blood for the right to do so. Adhya, their Ray, has seen to this. She has taught her people that the name must be kept, worn as a badge of honor and a fire to fuel their unending war against all exiles. Whether it originally fell to the Weavers or the Spires, it remains unknown, but when the Dweghom come to reclaim it, the Spires held it. Adhya was a Thane then, one of the 24 that led the march from the holds of the east with the permission of 3 different Rays from 3 different holds. Their missive was simple: reclaim Bedebos. The march had come prepared for a siege to last years, if not decades. It lasted 3 days. On the first day, the Dweghom began the construction of a walled encampment and watchtowers to ensure that the reinforcements from the spires of the Towering Man in the south would not flank them during an assault. On the second day, plans for tunnels to infiltrate the halls were drawn, as the Dweghom knew firsthand how easy it was to defend a hold's gates. Before the dawn of the third day, Adhya and her following gang controlled the gates in a surprise attack, hanging the head of abomination she had bested to signal for their comrades to attack en masse. It took more time for the hold to be cleared entirely than Adhya needed to plan and execute the attack to reclaim the hold. Many claim that the siege was but the first battle of a war that had not ended since. They are correct. Adhya's passionate hatred towards the exiles were not quenched by the reclamation of the hold. Named Ray for her victory, she had led Gorodon to one assault after the other against the Spires, against the Weavers, and against any human that even dared to try and settle in the slopes of the mountain range. What respite Adhya's enemies have found for over 6 centuries is only due to the internal struggles of her hold, but overall her people have enjoyed unprecedented unity in their efforts, united under a single banner and against multiple common foes. Some speculate that this is her goal, to provide a constant common enemy and keep her hold from suffering the same fate as others, avoiding the curse of all Dweghom. But Adhya would be the first to admit that this so-called curse neither troubles nor concerns her. For her, there is no such thing. The enemies of the Dweghom are clear in her mind. The dragons, of course, should any of them still living dare to resurface. The Spires who provided the tools for the sins of the dragons. The Weavers who conspired with them. The humans, whose wretched remnants of a decadent dominion, who smeared the dragons' depravities, who now rumors claim cohort with the Spires. Even the Nords who worshipped those foul parasites and accepted their gifts as divine blessings. The enemies of the Dweghom are all those who have slighted them, and Adhya remembers them all. Stories of Conquest Nord. 3 views on Mennhiem. I know an ash standing, Yggdrasil named, a tall tree bright, its roots holding Mennhiem as one. Trying loom with stone, under its shadow all is warmed, land and heart and mind. Beyond it, true cold reigns o'er, all the eye can see, a land dangerous twice over, for predators, fangs, and cold claws reign over white on ground, and white on trees, and white on sea, till summer come and gold light reveals. The Old Edda. Many are the names by which Mennhiem is known, and few of them are flattering. Crucible of monsters, cradle of horrors, frozen hell, the barbaric north, the Everdark, all claim a portion of the truth, but they all also ignore one thing. The land of the Nords holds a wild beauty beyond compare. From its high fjords scouring the dark northern sea to the imposing mountain range of Glad, its peaks towering above the endless dark forests and snowed valleys, the land of Mennhiem holds a dangerous allure, one reserved for some of the sturdiest, hardiest, and most enduring people the world has ever seen. Lying north of the continent of Surturus, Mennhiem is an island, created by the rise of the Gullid mountain range. Indeed, the Glad with its many peaks perpetually covered by snow and ice forms the backbone of the island, and while none but the Jotnar can endure its cold, it dominates the landscape. Regardless of where on Mennhiem one stands, By many, it is considered a different continent than Surturus, despite its smaller size, as the prevailing theory is that the island's rise is in fact a result of Surturus' moving to the south, allowing for volcanic masses to rise to the surface. While it is true that a huge part of the cavern system below Mennhiem is volcanic, its activities is dormant and there are no known active volcanoes on the island. That being said, most of the Glad Range has not been explored and recorded by humans. Professor Nicholas Skinton, University of Adhya. The learned fools of the south speak of the birth of mountain ranges and geological incidents. Good for them. Tradition tells another story, one befitting the people of Mennhiem. Mennhiem is the land between a fortress world built on the empty bottomless sea of Ginnungagap by the god Bur for his people to withstand the flames of Muspel below, colliding with the frozen mists of Nifl above. The myth is unsurprising. It speaks of the same endless conflict between the primordial equals as told by the native people of Ea all over. It is the first and last saga, creation and destruction. Locked in their endless duel, unlike in the other tales, for the Nords it is hard to tell which is which. Muspel and Nifl are both destructive natural forces that spell the doom for mortals and gods alike. The Aesir and Vanor wove their words into that tale, but Genesis for the people of Mennhiem tell the same tale as those of other peoples with one major deviation. Stability, equilibrium, what Southerners named balance, never came magically and out of nowhere to bring peace to the cosmos and offer a home to mortals. This age is not safe, and peace never truly settled over the world. The battle between primordials is ongoing. It is only the stronghold of the land between that allows for gods and mortals to endure. It was built by the labors of the gods. Lesser beings to such powers as Muspel and Nifl struggled to preserve against the powers that be. The southern sages may be right. Niflheim, the icy hell in the middle of Nifl, above could very well have been inspired by the icy peaks of Glad. Its freezing mists born from the windswept snow of its slopes. Muspel could have been deprived from the volcanic caverns below Mennhiem and the fiery nightmares it has spewed on occasion, now mostly forgotten. Right or not, however, those thoughts are meaningless and lose sight of the importance of the tales. Like the right to enter Valhalla, anything and everything is only gained through the fight and struggle. They are not choices for the people of Mennhiem. They are means for survival, a state of existence. H. Northern Sage. Stories of Ea. W'adrun, the Sky Farm. The W'adrun, due to their unique physiology, require near constant sustenance, with both established and roaming tribes being deeply dependent on the Great Oasis for the procurement of their ever-important nutritional hoards. For as long as the dead of the Old Dominion remain an elusive, scattered threat, this often violent balance was working, ensuring the survival of the W'adrun. But after the forced abandonment of the Lost Lands, the Yukunfazine realized the inevitable and the uncountable calamity that would descend upon her people from the east, and to this she spotted a threat beyond the violence of war: food shortages. Losing a single oasis, even for a short period of time, would strain her people, possibly beyond their limit. Thus, she devised a twofold plan. On one hand, she would nudge her hummingbird, Nagarel, towards leading many of the roaming tribes beyond the gate. This way, not only did she ensure the continuation of the W'adrun people, while preparing the ground for the rest of her people to follow, if needed, but also reduce the population that relied on the oasis for sustenance. The second part of her plan was less deceitful, though no less impactful. To begin weaning her people from the oasis they had called home for so long, the Yukunfazine envisioned an agricultural undertaking of mountainous proportions. Immediately after Nagral's departure, the goddess ordered for the construction of multifaceted terrace farms upon the eastern slopes of the Caltrain Mountains, beginning from the base of the mountain range and expanding upward near its frigid peaks. Bound laborers would arrive at the mountains en masse, accompanied by a veteran speaker and monstrous beasts of burden, birthing the Yukunfazine's vision into the reality. Thus, the rocky dermis of the clustered mountains has begun being molded and hewed into ascending terraces, packed with layers of gravel, porpoise stone, and fertile soil to create a patchwork of alpine farms. To populate such unique plots, the hardiest of vegetation and greenery were selected, carefully picked for W'adrun oasis-bound homes for their nutritional value and shared ability to persist through adversity. Such crops prominently included jade corn, whose starched ambient kernels are akin to bone in hardness, and death head tubers, whose vile-tasting roots can derive nutrient from the most inhospitable of soils. To feed this manufactured cornucopia, the Yukon Fazine has ordered for the carving of an expansive web of integration channels, drawing precious water from the cavernous glacial lakes dotted the very top of the Calustrine Mountains, and distributed among the segmented slopes of the farmland below. While a good portion of the crops yields are ferried back to the oasis homes of the W'adrun, hauled atop monstrous scale-covered beasts that form sprawling caravans, a sizable portion is instead stored at the base of the mountain range. Inside immense silos of compacted earth and stone, the living goddess is hoarding precious stores of life-giving substance, for she knows that her people will need it for the challenges that lie ahead. Vigilant within their sky-bound holds that are strewed across the crests of the Calustrine Mountains, the Order of the Sealed Temple have become aware of the W'adrun's agricultural machinations on the eastern side of the mountain. Fear is beginning to bubble across the Order, and the strength of old compacts is being questioned, as the threat of a W'adrun migration delude into the 100 Kingdoms is inching ever closer. Stories of Ea, the Old Dominion, the Whisperer. The Whisperer. Report 665-4212 by Sister Cassador Evan Crucendi, Ashen Dawn Archives. Object's name, the Whisperer, Anointed. Known aliases: Veiled Lady, Whispering Bride, Hidden Madonna, Lady of Whispers, the Champion's Bride, Eternal Maiden. I am able to report that some theories and speculations concerning the Whisperer, mainly put forth by my predecessors, the late brother Questor Mattis of Kunchin, have been, if not confirmed, then heavily supported by new evidence. As was brothers Matthias's suspicion, it would appear that the Whisperer has been foraging groups in the places where she has visited, from secret societies to heresies or cults from the deranged or desperate. It should be noted that the presence and activities of such groups have been our main means of tracking her movements. Thus, this conclusion could be based on our limited understanding and perception of her own activities, movements, and motivations. Alternative interpretation for the appearance of these groups is that they are simply fueled by a mere presence, a byproduct of her appearances, more than the result of her devices. While there are supporters of this theory among my team, I myself do not adopt this interpretation, and I base this on several observations. I must note that the Whisperer has betrayed little to no interest in the fate of her group after their creation, for she has neither reacted, opposed, or attempted to thwart the elimination of any of them either by us, the churches, or authorities. Furthermore, these groups seem isolated and operate separately, each with its own modus operandi, and adopting different rituals and beliefs. To this day, and throughout the years of observations, the different groups have never contacted or cooperated with their counterparts. These points could support the theory of lack of intention behind their creation, however such differences could also be perceived as planned. Despite their differences, it must be underlined that to our knowledge, the different groups have never clashed with each other. Realistically, fanaticism, which seems to be the most apparent common denominator among these different groups, rarely leaves room for competition or alternate dogmas, and yet, not once, not even when present in the same city, have these different groups vied for power and influence among those predisposed to such extremes. Intrigued by this observation, further investigation revealed that their differences are surface level only. While rituals and approaches differ, these groups share core beliefs and understandings. To our understanding, the Whisperer approaches entirely different groups of people, from the fanatical zealous or the bored privileged to the dissolute, hurt, desperate, and miserable. Thus, it seems natural to employ different means of approach that would resonate better with each targeted social group. Her cults often start as small heresies to the theist creed or new interpretations of existing deity. When left unchecked, a few of these groups evolve into death cults, which engage in violent conversions, abductions, ritualistic murder, whose rituals, however, may vary from extreme violence to kind poisoning, while a number of them have been led to mass suicides, especially among those groups that have been avoided detection for years. Such extremes, which have provided paramount to the investigation, must be perceived as rare. On at least 2 confirmed occasions, her teachings prevailed over a young gentleman's club, namely the Paragon Society of Hunt and Literature and a small brotherhood of knights, the Lyrsian Knights of the Little Lady, where the teachings of the Whisperer were embraced as philosophical ideas and interpretations of the oaths of fealty, respectively. The discovery of these groups was entirely accidental, which alarmingly could propose that more such cautious groups could exist. In fact, it could be speculated that the vast majority of the Whisperers groups remain introverted, preferring quiet conversation to aggressive methods that risk attracting attention. In the end, however, all types share one common goal: gain oaths of fealty from their followers or victims. This is done in the name of the Champion Return, the Savior's Son, the All-Father, sometimes Undying All-Father, and even if rarely so, Haziel by name. The last observation is perhaps the greatest indication that the Whisperer is purposefully bringing such groups of people together. Founding cults and heresy where the ground is fertile. If their presence was a simple byproduct, logic would suggest that at least some of these groups would turn their devotion to the Whisperer herself. While the Veiled Lady is often the object of admiration and adoration, she has, without fail, never been the central figure of the belief system of these groups. The presence of the Whisperer herself has been partially confirmed to date in 13 different cities on the outskirts of the Heartlands, while it also has been suggested that her presence in the kingdom may date to decades, if not centuries. There is little to no evidence to substantially support such an extreme scenario. Even so, one should not dismiss it entirely. While we can be reasonably certain of her presence at specific places and even during specific dates, she remains elusive. No eyewitnesses can be present, and we have only been able to place her presence after she has departed, or at least after her public appearances had ceased in a significant area. Despite the numerous reports and the reasonable accuracy tracking of her movements, no discernible pattern can be detected, and therefore none of our predictions so far have been successful. It must be admitted that we are no closer now to apprehend or terminate her than we were 5 years ago. Conclusion. Based on the above observations, I propose that the purpose of this anointed existence is, for the lack of a better term, recruitment. Despite past failures, suggested course of action must remain infiltration of these groups, followed by extraction and or termination of the Whisperer herself. Stories of Adhya, the City-States, the Port of Rhodea. The city-state of Rhodea, located on the island of the same name at the lower northwest quadrant of the city-state's peninsula, is known for its masterful craftsmanship and extensive industrial prowess. The massive harbor cities, endless reverberations from the droning of countless shipyards and metallic clamoring of workshops and forges. So impressive is the port of Rhodea, nestled within the oceanic passage known as the Gilded Horn, that it has been acknowledged throughout Adhya as a perilous mechanical wonder. Such is the complexity of the port's combined constructs that inventors and engineers and craftsmen across the world travel to Rhodea en masse, seeking to gain knowledge through their educational pilgrimage. Most of the major mechanical curiosities that populate the port are the product of a single ingenious mind, that of the legendary Rhodenian inventor Yapatya, a key member of the Rhodea Scholae. During her life, governing the city's even powerful engineering guild, Yapatya forged the island city into a harbor bastion it is today, designing a slew of devastating defensive measures to protect her patron city. The two most prominent of these inventions are the Great Chain of the Gilded Horn and the Colossus of Rhodea, both being the city-state's primer of safeguarding instruments against potential enemies. The Great Chain occupies the entrance to the Gilded Horn and consists of 2 statues, one at each side of the horn's entrance. The statues are carved in likeliness of Rhodea's twin gods, Ishtamina, the goddess of invention, and Ishmaeos, the god of crafting, with each cradling immense heaps of coiled chain atop their raised arms. The main chain is made of an impossibly strong alloy, and individual links are the size of a fully grown warhorse, from which central links hangs a descending mesh of smaller chains, creating a gigantic metal partition when fully spread out. Most of the time, the Great Chain remains dormant at the bottom of the ocean, dripping downward from each enormous figure and lying atop a bed of tangled seaweed, sand, and salt-bitten shipwrecks. Yet when the horns of war sound across Rhodea, the chain bulwark is raised, hoisted by complex gear-driven mechanisms housed within each statue, that tug and pull at the metallic shackles erected the entire structure. To sail through the iron veil of the Great Chain is to invite death. Larger vessels are unable to pass entirely, while smaller ships risk getting flayed by the lesser chain appendages. The Colossus of Rhodea, perhaps the most famous of Yapetia's menagerie of inventions, is the city-state's final and most effective deterrent towards an invasion. With a full height akin to a minor mountain, the Golden Giant is the main fixture of Rhodea's skyline. Atop its 2 outstretched hands, a device known as the Panoptes, a spherical assortment of hefty, finely tuned lenses that can harness sunlight, when the weather allows as much, and redirect it as a beam of concentrated heat. The solar ray can singe away most materials, being known to even melt metal at certain angles. Such is the might of Rhodea's combined machine arsenal, that few dare to attack the port city directly. For those that do, their hubris continues to litter the murky expanse within the bowels of the sea. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Storytime. I hope everyone who listened enjoyed my telling of these stories. If there's any stories you'd like me to read out, just shoot me a link to the story, or even just DM me a message on Discord and I'll go do it. BonkTable has podcasts, battle reports, and a Discord. You could find all those in the description below. I'm kind of tired because I read a lot. I might just leave that part in. It's fun sometimes. But overall, thank you for listening to these stories. Check out the battle reports, podcasts, and our Discord. You could find them in the description below. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.